Shane, we are live. They let us come back for Manic and Chill another week. How you doing, my friend?
I mean, they kind of have to, right? Because them is us. So we are them. So as long as we want to do this, we'll keep doing this, I think.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Welcome in, everybody. Another Manic and Chill. Thank you for being here. If you haven't already and you're in the building, like, subscribe. Trying to grow this channel here on DDFFB. A lot of content come out over the last, what have it been, 14 days-ish? 10 to 14 days since we've been putting out content on here?
Yeah, it's been about 2 weeks. Bunch of mocks on there. A lot of Dynasty Theory dudes are on there. They got a couple shows a week on there. Mitch and John have a show. And then obviously Dynasty Theory. Yeah, we've been rocking out on there. On here, I should say.
Yeah, the fantasy trending topics. There'll be one of those coming out. There will be another mock draft coming up that will drop on Friday. And then there will be another trade show on Saturday and Destination Dynasty Quick Hit coming out on Sunday. So a lot of content coming out the rest of this week. But let's get to the theme tonight. I asked Shane last week, Shane, what do you want to talk about? Because we did a show, the first episode of Manic and Chill back. We kind of reflected on 3 bad trades that we each made. But now it is players that everybody else is buying that we are not in on. And I think this is an interesting one. Let's just start with the actual topic. And I'm sure the chat will chime in with some players that come to mind for them, trades they've seen coming down in their leagues. But I think we have to decipher one thing before we start this, Shane. This is not necessarily players that other people are buying because it's the offseason, right? Like when you sent this topic to me, I immediately am thinking, okay, well, there's only so many players that people even want to buy in the offseason. You know, like they're young players, players that are ascending, players that were good. Like it really trims down the number of assets out there that people actually want to buy. So right there, it's kind of like that eliminates a lot of pieces that probably could be good buys, but there's just not a lot of interest in buying. I don't know. I'll give an example. Like, you know who's probably a decent running back? Zach Charbonnet. But he's just not really on anybody's radar to buy. Do you know what I mean? Like he's young, but he's not. Yeah. He's young, but he's not super young. He's good, but he's not great. He's been around. His situation is okay, not great, not terrible. But that's not the type of player that people are going, okay, he is trending upwards and I have to buy him. Same with a lot of the older players. You know, Terry McLaurin had a great season. He's probably not a player where people are like, I have to get him for next year. So right there, it probably eliminates 90% of the player pool to where like a lot of the players that are on, and we'll use the Dynasty Daddy and Keep Trade Cut, you know, most frequently traded players or risers. Like there's a certain theme to a lot of these players. They're either young and kind of just busted out, or they are rookies from this past year. It's pretty much everybody else is in the category of, yeah, I'm past those players. They're not that interesting. They're not really somebody I'm going out to target. So how did you, when you came up with this topic, like what came to your mind with why you wanted to do an entire episode on it?
It's a good question, right? Why does my brain work the way it does?
That's a whole nother show.
I think it's just, I think it's just being, I don't know. I don't want to say I'm contrarian just to be contrarian, but I do often feel I buck against what general convention might be, right? Or consensus. When people are like, oh, well, you should do this. And I'm like, well, no, everyone thinks you should do that. So I'm going to drive down the opposite lane. And that's pretty much how I felt with, you know, some of the players, right? Because I was listening to some podcasts and I heard people talking about, you know, oh, it's a great time to buy Bryce Young. It's a great time to buy Ken Walker, things like that. And I'm like, well, no, not really. You know, like Bryce Young, a great time to buy him, just for example, would have been right after he got benched, not after he finished the season with 5 touchdowns and everybody's telling you that he's just as good as CJ Stroud. Now, you know, of course, that doesn't mean that I don't want Bryce Young on my roster. For example, I like Bryce Young enough, but not enough to pay what someone's going to want me to pay. Like, I don't want to pay the full freight ever if I can pull it off. There's certain players that I'll pay full freight for, right? Like no doubt about it, studs, elite players that have done it forever. 2 years is forever, really. But like, and I don't want to, trust me, I'm not saying he's bad in any way. I don't want anyone attacking me, but like Jackson Smith and Jigba, I don't feel like it's a great time to buy him considering the hype that he's coming off of, right? And that's one of the players that people, again, will tell you like, oh, you need to buy Jackson Smith and Jigba. All right, well, why? Like, you know what I mean? Like, he just smashed last year. He's wide receiver 17 through 17 games. I don't know what it was through 16. Probably not far off from there. So that's basically what brought it to mind and my thought process when I send it over to you when I text you back.
So here's where I know that, like, let's just go through real quick some of the names on the top 5 fallers list on Keep Trade Cut, right? So these are not the players that people are buying. You can interpret this as these are the players people want to sell the most. But when I give you all these names, Shane, your probably reaction to these names are going to go, who the fuck wants to buy these guys, right? Like Tank Dell is the #1 guy people don't want. Like, well, yeah, he's out for the year next year probably. So like, yeah, he's a faller. He's probably a player that if you asked everybody in this chat, would you want to sell or buy Tank Dell? They would say, oh, I'd love to sell Tank Dell.
Right.
But nobody wants to buy him. You know what I mean? Or the range of where you'd want to buy him for would be like, here, I'll give you a 4th and I'll use a roster spot on him. Like that. So nobody probably is interested in the fallers. George Pickens. Is anybody buying George Pickens?
I will.
I'm throwing out the bad ones before we get into the risers. George Pickens?
I will say not many
at the prior George Pickens price. He's a wide receiver.
Right.
He's wide receiver 30. Are you buying him now?
I will, because the sentiment around him is negative. So yes, when really nothing's changed except that he's a douchebag, right? Well, he's always been a douchebag. Like that's literally his personality. That's who
you got to give up a 26 first for him. Are you doing it?
No, not doing
okay, well, but that's the wide receiver 30 price. If you look at all the receivers in that range, they're not guys you're just easily buying for a first. I mean, let's look at where George Pickens sits right now. He is currently, let's see how far he's actually fallen. It's not been so far. Yeah, wide receiver 21. So he's right there with Rome Odunze, Devontae Smith, Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers, Chris Olave, Jameson Williams, Jalen Waddle, DK Metcalf, Xavier Worthy. You like him over any of those guys? DK Metcalf, maybe?
DK Metcalf, yeah. Chris Olave.
You like Pickens over Olave?
But that's for different reasons. For different reasons, obviously, right? Like if Olave didn't have his concussion issues, it'd probably be Olave, but we are where we are.
Okay.
No ifs. What's that saying? If ifs were butts and candies and nuts, then
if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, then every day would be a Merry Christmas. I'll be the one that that throws those out there. But okay, George Pickens. The next one, Will Levis. That's everyone would love to sell Will Levis. Do you have any interest in buying him?
Yes.
I do. He's going to be a backup. He's going to be a quarterback on a 2 deep. That price,
I'll tell you what.
I'll give you a 3rd. But that's that.
When rookie drafts hit, right, and you're on the board and you've got the 306 and someone's creaming, they got to move up and get, I don't know. It doesn't matter. Whoever's going to be there at 306.
Whatever player they want, right?
Doesn't matter. Really doesn't. I'll go, sure, you can have him. I'll take Will Levis because right now is probably the lowest he can be, right? I guess the rookie draft will be the lowest he could be because at that point, Cam Ward will have taken his job or whoever will be the starting quarterback in Tennessee.
Yeah. A few others. I mean, these 2 players are fallers and they're not players that were injured. They're not players that had bad years. They don't really have any negative sentiment around them other than, one of the 2 probably didn't have as good of a year as Shane thought he could, but Joe Mixon. It's random that Joe Mixon is a faller because I think he's in the range with a lot of other old running backs that he was good, not great. He's subject to them drafting a running back, which I think we expect a lot of teams to draft running backs, but like that would be the kind of player that nobody's probably chasing to buy. It just comes down to what are you willing to pay for those types of players. If it's an old running back, because I think all old running backs probably fall into the range of they're not super sexy to buy at this time of the year. How do you interpret, whether you would buy a guy like Joe Mixon? Because I do think, and I'll give a shout out to Cody Smith. usually I remember last year listening to Cody, and one of the things he said that he's different than the industry is he will be 20-30% higher on the price of the veterans when nobody else wants to buy the veterans. Not he'll take Joe. We would all buy Joe Mixon, right?
Right.
I'll give you a mid-second. The seller, what do we talk about on Trades in 5 all the time? If you have Joe Mixon on a good team, are you selling for the 205? No.
No.
Do you know what I mean? Because what he's valued to you on your roster construction is higher than what you're getting paid. That's where Cody comes in. He goes, I'll give you the 112. And most people would go, oh, you're dumb. Why would you give a first? You know what I mean?
Right.
But then the edge is if he's right, he ends up with a player that you couldn't have got that. Hey, and look who's in the room. What's up, Cody? But the point is, to buy the veterans that everybody says are unvaluable and unsexy in the offseason, you can't be at the market price because the market price doesn't entice the seller to just give them away. You have to be higher, which means I do think there's a blind spot for a lot of people. And maybe it's easier to get those types of players in startups. But I think in trades, like nobody today is like, I have the 203 and the 204, and I'm going bargain basement vet hunting with those picks. It just doesn't feel like that's exciting, but it might be an edge.
I do, that is something, and it, there's very.
You and I don't do that. We do not do that. We do not look to move our rookie picks for, and you're not getting the studs. You're not getting Mike Evans or Saquon Barkley. You're getting, you got to pay the 203 for Cortland Sutton, the 112 for Cortland Sutton, and you're betting he better do what he did this year, next year, or you lose that trade.
Yeah, I'll tell you.
None of us are ever doing that. You and I, especially.
We we would be better served if we did that. Now, not from a flexibility perspective, right? What do we like to pick? The reason we like the picks is because of the flexibility. But once we have to make the pick, well, the flexibility is gone. So the allure of what we wanted is gone, right? We like future picks. I don't like current picks as much. I like future picks because I can still kick the can. I can still buy other things with them. But on the clock, the 203, I'm better served taking Cortland Sutton. I'm better served taking Jerry Jeudy. I don't know who else would fall in that range, but any wide receiver really in that range. A couple of years ago, I did try the whole let me buy some old people for seconds, right? Like Amari Cooper and Tyler Lockett. Didn't work out for me. I think it hurt my feelings a little bit, but I won't go that old. But I think if you're on the clock at 203, as deep as this draft is, in general, you probably, on a competing roster, right? You should probably try to make that move for Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton. It's funny they were on the same team and they both thrived without each other. I think that's not a bad thing. Like I like Cody's idea of, you know what? I might overpay for a veteran because that is the only way you can get them, right? If that's the only way you can get them.
Well, and I think, I want to call you out a little bit on this because I think you even kind of hedged your bets a little bit. Cody doesn't care how old they are. He was all, I'll pay a late first for Devontae Adams last year. Cooper Kupp. I don't care if they're 32. It is just strictly about the production. And Cortland Sutton's going to be 30 when the season hits. But I think the idea is, he's going to be 30 on October 10th, 2025. So but
I'll tell you what, I bought Devontae Adams last year for a late first. As soon as he went to the Jets, I said, I don't care if he's 32 years old or however old he is. Like he's Devontae Adams and he's getting married back to Aaron Rodgers. Like I'm good with this. I'll worry about next year.
And I think that would be the pushback on this strategy is like, okay, some of these players, when you're starting to get into that first territory, right? I think you get to a point where you go, okay, I'm buying at a higher than market price, but I'm also buying at the price that I could probably get this player no matter what with that price later. I don't have to take any risk. I mean, you buy a veteran in March, there's risk that they're not in the same spot that they were in March, in September. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there is some risk that not every player survives the entire offseason healthy with the same role. And they're just exactly what you think they can be. But I think to wrap this up, like the whole point was sometimes the best buys, the ones that nobody talks about, the ones that nobody really thinks about really being aggressive on are those ones that, and you may listen to a lot of pods. I've started to listen to a lot more Dynasty pods and stuff again. And it's like everybody would buy Mike Evans for a second. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about going and paying the slightly higher price than that, because in a lot of leagues, like, that deal just doesn't happen unless you find the manager that had Mike Evans that goes, I'm just getting rid of him because I want to get rid of him. When we get in a lot of the leagues that we're in, where there's a lot of players that are playing the week-to-week, month-to-month Dynasty game, you know who has Mike Evans in every league? Cody. You know what I mean? He's not selling him. There isn't a sell price. The sell price is, it has to be so ridiculous or I'm not selling him. So it's like, that does feel like a blind spot if you're willing to be a little bit ahead of market on that.
Well, and yeah, and I mean, we're in that season, right? And I've started listening to the mainstream pods again. The ones that think Dynasty leagues are start 7. Shout out to dude in our YouTube comments. But I've started listening to the mainstream pods again too, because they do that. They go, oh, it was a great buy, Mike Evans. Well, yeah, if I can get him for a second. And I'm just thinking as you're talking this through, right? If I do have, let's say, the 112, why would I be more reticent to move that than the 204? Like, is there really, I know one's a first, one's a second, but when it's on the clock, the 112, it's no longer has the allure of a future first, right? So why shouldn't I be more aggressive using that and being okay to use that when I would use the 203 or the 204 to get that player?
It's fear of, I mean, this is exactly what it is. It's fear of there being something better that you're missing out on. And that time and, I guess, changed value of rookie picks and hype of the class, you're selling low. Now, here's the thing. You know how many times I've said I can't do that deal because I think I'm selling a little low? Really, what I'm feeling is that I want to give it a little more time to see if I can get a better deal, or that information changes in my favor, which, if you have draft picks right now, I mean, you'll hear us and a lot of other content creators say that draft picks only get more valuable over the next couple months. So don't trade them at the market price today, because that market price is going to shift upwards over the next 2-3 months. That's great. But if I give you an offer for the 112, and it's one where you're kind of like, that's 80% of the way there, that's pretty fair. You declining, the only thing you're declining is, you know what? I know there's going to be a better offer that comes down the road. You know what I mean? You ever watch Shark Tank before, Shane?
I know, but I know the premise. Yes.
It's like, I'll offer you this. I think it's going to be worth more down the road. Now, it could be, but unlike that, Dynasty does have a very fickle market to where I've been burned, where I'm like, oh, I'm not trading you this 108 today because I think I can do better. And then the draft comes and I can't do better. In fact, I can do only worse because something in that tier changed. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's usually we think things are going to be changing in my favor. So instead of just taking the bird in the hand, we kind of we push it forward. We go, oh, there's going to be a better deal that comes down. And sometimes we don't even put in the work to get the better deal. And it just never comes.
I'm just waiting for it to come to me. And it's funny, as you talk about that, I'm thinking about the Tyreek Hill roller coaster I went on over the last few weeks of the season. So, I offered him up to someone. They didn't want him. He smashes. They send me the same offer I sent them. And I go, well, you should have accepted that last week. Then he hits a dud again. And guess what? Now I'm trying to sell him back. And he's like, well, I don't want him. So sometimes you do absolutely kick yourself in the nuts when I keep saying this, right? That's my phrase forever. Perfect is the enemy of good. Sometimes good enough is just enough, right? Like, I don't have to squeeze every last cent out of something, or at least I don't need to hold out in the hopes of squeezing additional juice out of something when the cup's already full, and that it is a hard thing to reconcile, because you are trained, right? We're trained, and we tell people the same thing. We're like, add a third, get a third at it. You know what I mean? Like, just anytime someone sends us, we're looking at a trade offer, like, oh, is this a good trade? Yeah, but what can you get us at it? You know what I mean? Like, it's never just like, yes. It's always like, well, what else can you get added to it? So sometimes and obviously we make deals. So at some point or another, we do just accept it. But I think a lot of times it is hard to reconcile that. Like that Tyreek Hill trade I could have made. My team would have gotten younger. It's a team that's not rebuilding so much, more retooling. And he would look better on another roster, and the assets that they had would look better on mine.
Let's hit a couple of these questions, and then we'll talk about these rising players that people are buying that we're not necessarily into. Yeah, landing spots only make things worse.
Right.
I wouldn't say landing spots only make things worse, but I think we also look at landing spots as positive things where, we do the draft stream every year, and there's just as many bad landing spots as there are good. You know what I mean? Like, we want every landing spot to be good. I can probably say that every landing spot, I can spin it to sell you why it could be good. But that's a big difference between when a player goes to this landing spot, everybody immediately likes it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Most of the time, it's like half and half.
Mhm.
I like this guy's spot, but I don't like this guy's spot. So to think, okay, all of these players are going to land in spots that actually bring their arrow upwards, it's usually the other way around. It's like some of them go up, some of them go down. The picks don't necessarily change value that much. Maybe the tiers change a little bit in terms of where people really want to be. But I've talked about this in the past too. When you get to rookie drafts, if you have a lot of sharp people in your rookie draft that tap into a lot of the same content, the best places to trade from, where you can probably get the most advantageous deals, are the ranges or the tiers that everybody wants to be in. It's very easy to go, I have a tier of 3 elite players and then 4 really good players, and I would love to trade the 108 and lower. But guess what everybody wants to get into, Shane? The top 7, right? So if you have the 106, that should be the pick you're trying to trade instead of trying to force the players or the tiers that nobody really wants to. Trade from the places where there is demand, not from what you want to trade away. What else we got? We had a couple other questions that I wanted to throw up in here.
Yeah, and a couple of them are actually, there you go. 1 year production bet that the vet is a better producer than the random years 108. And yeah, I'll take that.
I think production wise, yes. What you lose here is every once in a while there are a lot of players that go in that range of that type of pick where you miss out on a potential riser. Now, like Ladd McConkey, Xavier Worthy, Brian Thomas last year, right? All 3 of those guys, you probably could have got a little of a better market than the single pick you used to pick them. But to Cody's point, let's say you drafted Brian Thomas, right? At the 108. You have a player that's worth higher than a 108 today.
Yes.
But he's not worth more than the 108 if you're not willing to sell him. You're still subject. If he's just on your roster and you're like, he's incredible, he's subject to how good he actually is. Now, we think he's very good, but you don't actually realize that profit unless you move him, which is probably a reason where Cody's like, well, I don't have a lot of Brian Thomas, but the people with him still didn't make the move to sell him. Do you know what I mean? So you just miss out on production that you miss on the players in that range. It isn't like a lost market because most people don't trade those players when they're massive hits in that range anyway, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I don't want to keep haggling over this, but I like this topic, and this happens sometimes, right? We have a topic, but someone brought something up and I like it better. It's just it's a dynamic. Okay. So if you continually do that, what happens to your roster? You continually going for the vets, right? You don't care about age. Cody's crusties, right? So you've got a team of Mike Evans, Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill. I don't know. Give me another old producer, whatever. It doesn't matter. Travis Kelce, because you've literally gone, all right, I'll give my 108. I'll give my 109. I'll give my 110, etc. When the bill comes due, what are you replacing them with?
Well, now you're getting into kind of a more binary process of building teams, right? Like it is, you might make one of those picks for the pure reason that you don't want to add another older player to your team, right? Even if you think the player you could get is better than the pick, you might take the player just to kind of mix up with the type of roster that you're building. You know what I mean? And that's how I play Dynasty. It's sometimes frustrating to articulate this to people that are listening and following, but almost every move that I make, and you can attest because you play in a lot of leagues with me, almost every move I make is not specific to a player. It is very specific to what is the purpose of having that type of asset, and a lot of assets fall into a range of, if I'm looking outside, and I'll be dropping a Destination Dynasty piece later this week of when I don't have an elite asset, and we can debate where the elite assets end, whether that's top 20, top 30. When I say elite, I mean like they can hold their value through a season-ending injury and still bounce right back to being an asset that's coveted. Think like Rashee Rice. Like that would kind of be like the cutoff. You know what I mean? Anybody below that, though, Shane? Why don't we treat any player below that as either a year-to-year asset or an asset that the masses may think has a good potential to increase in value? But that only matters if the purpose for them being on your team is you're actually going to trade them, right? Like if you're just going to hold on to them, then it doesn't really matter if Keon Coleman is wide receiver 30 or wide receiver 20. He falls in a range where he's probably just another starting receiver or flex player on your team. But unless you are going to actively seek out profiting on that rise that he could still have, that somebody around him, like Brandon Ayuk and Keon Coleman, are back-to-back. But they're not the same type of asset, right? One's 6 years older than the other, and one is injured, and probably his demand will never go up anymore. Keon Coleman's could. But if I'm willing to look at Keon Coleman and say, okay, he's just in the flex range or, my wide receiver 3 range, then he doesn't matter aside from what can I do with him today. I'm either using him or I'm trading him. And if the market value exceeds what equity he's giving to my team, then I'll trade him away. I don't care about his future. Does that make sense? So like almost every player you can throw into this range unless they're elite assets. So it doesn't matter if I moved Keon Coleman to Mike Evans in that range. Who cares?
All right. So a player, just because you're talking about Keon Coleman, makes this struck a chord in my head. This is a player that I've heard a lot of people say that you should be buying. So I want to see how you feel about it, right? I know we hate player takey stuff too, right? And that's like our first episode outside of trades is so player takey, but like Roma Dunze, not like Roma Dunze, not like him, specifically Roma Dunze. That is a person that people are saying, yeah, he's probably a buy. Now, if that buy, we're talking about paying full market freight, right? Say you can get him for 106. You get a slight discount off of what you probably got him for last year. Is that something you think you'd be willing to do?
I'm going to revert to the answer of what I just tried to describe. I'm glad you brought him up because he's a perfect player. If I have a roster full of guys that Cody would roster, I would rather trade the 106 for Roma Dunze than I would trade it for, think of the most productive veteran that I could trade it for, right? I'd rather trade the 106 for Roma Dunze than I would trade it for, I don't know, Saquon Barkley.
Saquon Barkley, good. Okay.
Like that's probably like the most productive veteran that you could buy, and it would probably take at least that pick to get him. But I think if you have a roster full of guys Cody would roster, I don't want to add another one. You know what I mean? I don't want to add another volatile piece. So the decision there do I think Barkley outproduces Roma Dunze probably for the rest of his career? I think that's probably a good bet for the next couple years, right? But on that type of roster, I would have to look at that and say, not which one's the most productive, but which one could push my roster forward a little bit by making that deal. And it's either trade for a Dunze or probably keep the 106 because I don't want to overload my team with what you were talking about. So the purpose of doing it would have nothing to do with production. So I'd probably have to say, look, what's the rest of my team look like? If it's a team that's full of Roma Dunzes from last year, I might do Saquon. Do you know what I mean? Like it's the balance of how my construction is already set up. What's the trajectory of my team? I think that factors into play a lot more for me than it would be the actual players.
And then I would assume at least some of the consideration, at least making that deal, let's just say it's Saquon. You could get either player for the 106, right? Part of the consideration is, well, who actually has more value, dynasty value, right? I know we poo-pooed dynasty value a lot during the season. We're in the off season where dynasty value is a thing again. It does affect trades because people do have that in their head. Like this player's got more dynasty value.
And I hate the term value. It's not fucking value. Value is based on what is it worth going forward? What and in the offseason, it's what are they going to produce going forward? And this is something that's changed over the years. When people are debating like Saquon Barkley's dynasty value, they're not debating the future asset Saquon Barkley. They're debating what is he going to produce, right? So dynasty value has been replaced because there's very little, at least for me and you, there's very little. Like, are you looking at, I'm going to try to find a player that this makes sense for. I'll give you one. A guy that's right on the fringe of being a top 100 asset. Xavier Legette. When I give you the name Xavier Legette, and you're trying to assess his dynasty value, are you looking at what is his value going to be over the next 3 to 5 years? Or are you just simply thinking, can he play or can he not? Or I like him and the market doesn't, or the market likes him and I don't. But it's very much just do people want him? I will sell him, right? You know what I mean? Like it isn't like I'm doing this long-term analysis on this company over the next 5 years. It is, where does he stand on the market compared to how much I like him versus the masses? You know what I mean? Like dynasty value is now just dynasty demand. Of course, Saquon Barkley's dynasty value is lower today than it was 3 weeks ago. You know, like he's just not as in demand, but where the trades are being done with guys like him, the value is still much higher to actually get a deal done. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And, look, I'm just looking it up right now. Barkley, just for funsies, because I think this is going to be something interesting to watch. Saquon Barkley's the 20th ranked player on KTC right now, which is bananas wild to me. One, it's a running back. Two, it's a 28-year-old running back. Yeah, it's just all of it is crazy to me. But I do wonder, coming off the running back renaissance that we just had, how much in value these players actually value. I know you just said you hate that, but how much demand is actually going to fall for them, right? Because people are going to be talking about how running backs are back. Running backs are back. Discounting the fact that, yeah, but we also have a whole slew of running backs that are going to ether a lot of the existing running backs. Obviously not Saquon and probably not Derrick Henry, but they're going to ether a lot of the other running backs. But I am interested to see how the demand changes for them, because I don't think the demand is going to diminish much for that high-end elderly producer, right? I don't think it for Derrick, and I don't think for Saquon we're going to see a stark or steep decrease in demand.
Well, here's an even better way to articulate this for the crowd. So Saquon Barkley is currently the equivalent of like the 102 or 103, right? Now, how many deals actually would go down where Saquon is being moved straight up for the 103? Like that's his price. You and I wouldn't pay it. There's other people out there in some leagues that go, I would never sell him because I want him to win me the championship next year, right? So it's almost like, to get an actual Barkley deal done, it's got to be a different type of deal than a 1-for-1 asset. So I struggle with putting him in a tier with a single player or rookie pick, because you can't really compare him to an equivalent young receiver. You know what I mean? You can't compare him to an equivalent single rookie pick. What do most trades involving a guy like Saquon look like, Shane? In leagues, if you saw them go down, they're not a 1-for-1. You know what I mean? There's a package. There's some leverage. There's, another running back and a pick, or a running back and a receiver, or, a QB and a pick. Like so that makes it really tricky with his value, because his value is going to be much more creative and be very much based on the teams that are trading him or buying him than just a 1-for-1 pick equivalent. Because it's just, nobody's going, here, I have the 103. What I should do today is go buy Saquon. It just doesn't feel like that happens.
I still think people value youth more than they do lots of other things. So I do think closer to the draft, obviously we're 4 months away, whatever, 5 months away from most drafts, 4 months away. I do think there's going to be people that just go, yeah, I'll take the 103 for Saquon, or I'll buy. What am I trying to say? I would like the 103. Give me the 103. You can have Saquon. Give me the 104. You can have Saquon. They might ask for like a late second just to make themselves feel better inside, but there's still this innate, you mentioned it earlier, right? Fear of missing out. There's this innate thing about Dynasty that you are afraid that you're missing the next big thing, even when you already have the current big thing on your roster.
Well, and let's just say we had somebody that didn't want to sell Saquon, and I said, here, I'll give you the 103. But I also told you, Shane, you have to just use that 103 to pick a player.
Right.
Right there, you become less motivated to move Saquon, right? Like if you're the team that has been building your team for years, the Cody Smith way, right? Like I'm all in, give me the most production. You know that even the 103 for him right now is probably a fair deal. But if I told you you are limited to what you can do with that 103, you just have to draft another player, you're probably like, I'm less likely to do it. Why you would do it is like, okay, now I have the 103. Give it 2 months. I may be able to move the 103 for Alvin Kamara and another first. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden, I like my deal even better. But it was because I had to make another trade on top of it. And that's where I think you have to have a plan when you make a lot of these deals. Like, what is your next move? What is your thought 2 months down the road? You know, it's not always going to be just a 1-for-1, which makes it full circle coming to that conversation with the vets. You want to talk about some of the risers that we're supposed to design the show around, and it's been 36 minutes.
And then we've got some questions. And then we have some questions that I'd like to hit. Just, people put them in there. I appreciate them watching.
Yeah, we'll hit the questions in the last 10 minutes or so. But I wanted just to mention a couple players just to kind of get things cooking here. Let's go with the receivers first. The names that came up, you already said Rome Odunze, but Marvin Mims and Jalen McMillan.
Absolutely not Marvin Mims.
Not Marvin Mims? Okay, can I pose a neutral pitch for both players?
Oh, of course, sir.
So, go to the Trinity tool, ddfantasyfootball.com. If you haven't already subscribed, there's a link in the description. You can sign up. You get a promo code, 50% off the first week or first month to try out the Trinity tool. But second half of the year, give a little leeway. And I know you don't like this logic, but treating Marvin Mims almost like he was a rookie, even though when he was actually a rookie, he did nothing.
No, you know what? And that's fine because he was basically redshirted, right? I think they just used him as a returner. That's basically the only way they used him.
Yes. So second half of the year. So plus he was dealing with a rookie quarterback. You know what I mean? Let's just give him the benefit of the doubt. He's still only put in a 4.7 Trinity for the second half of the year. Now that really spiked in the last couple weeks, but that's basically saying you're going to buy into the last couple games as what he is versus, what he probably is, Shane? He's probably a good third receiver that has a role that if you buy him, you're probably paying for the name cachet and the riser, and you're going to end up being able to replicate exactly what he gives you over the next couple of years with a lot of other players that aren't even being talked about. That's the negative is okay, why am I buying him just because of the last couple of weeks? And because this is where ADV comes in. Marvin Mims was a prospect a lot of people liked, Shane.
I loved him coming out. He was one of my favorite wide receivers.
This is a player people wanted to be good. So now that he did what he did, there's a reason he's on the trending buy list. And other players that are, who's better than Marvin Mims? Pop Douglas. I don't see him on the trending buy list, right? But you could go, what's the difference between the two over the next couple of years? Is there that much of a difference other than one people loved and one people had never heard of? So that's where you're kind of what would you pay for Marvin Mims? Because I would buy him, but he'd have a very specific spot. It would have to be one of those leagues where I know I'm living with whatever he gives me, and that's fine. But what would you pay? Because the person that has him is I need at least a second. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're not getting that from me.
Exactly.
So I'm just looking at Marvin Mims scoring, right? And I know it was fluky, unless I'm bad at math, which sometimes I am. It looks like he had 7 touchdowns over the last how many weeks is this? 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, all included. That's a lot of touchdowns. I'm not a mathematician, right? So let's say there's 5 times that by 3, right? Because there are 17 games. That's a 21 touchdown pace season for someone that touched the ball, I don't know, less than 100 times. I think that's probably not sustainable. I would say that's not sustainable. So, if someone wants a second for him, unfortunately, they're not going to get it from me. But he's probably one of those players that if you're trying to get a second for him off, you're selling him for a second. Can you add a third and a third and a third? You know what I mean? A couple thirds to him to get to that second, to get the second back for him. But no, I would not be buying Marvin Mims.
Yeah, he's wide receiver 53. And it's interesting because I look at him and I see a bunch of players that are below him that, again, if I just have him for a very specific reason, so you're probably not interested in him unless you're playing in a start 11, start 12. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, yeah, he came on at the end of the year, but if he is your last flex player, because again, I don't even want him if he's just going to hang out on my bench. Unless I know I can do something else with the asset, he probably has a very specific spot. I don't want to have him and Cedric Tillman and Demario Douglas on the same team. You know what I mean? Like, I only need one guy like that. I don't need 5. But then I look at some of these cheaper guys and I'm like, honestly, is there a huge difference between Marvin Mims and some of the guys that are farther below him that are just older? I mean, who would you rather have, Hollywood Brown or Marvin Mims? Calvin Ridley or Marvin Mims? You know what I mean? Like, those are players technically you should be able to get with the same price.
Yeah, and I know Josh is in here. Hey, Josh. He's just pointing out that it was a Trinity riser over the last 4 weeks. He's still, just looking at his snap share. My dude didn't crack 50% once. This season, not once.
His Trinity was good, but it's still, over the last 4 weeks, was still only a 6. So it's not like he just completely flipped the script on what he was. Now, the theme is that the entire year, pretty much, or at least the second half of the year, he was always above the regression line. So you can maybe argue that his situation is a little better than what his usage is. You know what I mean? And that's the same with the next player, Jalen McMillan. That's another one that's a riser. That's actually the highest riser on KTC. It's been good. There's the thought that Chris Godwin leaves and doesn't come back, which just makes Jalen McMillan Chris Godwin. But I don't know. Jalen McMillan also feels like probably a little better than Marvin Mims, but he also feels like a player that people wish casted to being what he's been. And it's almost like a guy like him benefited from every other rookie receiver last year that wasn't like a top 40 pick sucking. You know what I mean? Like, he was the one, so it's like he's just clearly way better. I mean, he is all the way up at wide receiver 32 on Keep Trade Cut. I would show this to Cody, and I would go, Jalen McMillan is ahead of Cody. Shut your ears. Mike Evans, Tyreek Hill, Chris Godwin, Devontae Adams. You know what I mean? Like, interesting.
I got to be honest with you, right? So you know me. I love just looking at what rookie wide receivers have done in their rookie season, because that's why they're rookie wide receivers. And then just taking a look at the other wide receivers that are within that range by generally like half a point both ways, maybe a point or so. He's going to have a pretty good group of players with him. The problem is this kind of even gets back to not the same team. What are you willing to pay? Because is someone going to accept a second? I think anyone you offer a second to from Marvin Mims would absolutely snap it up. Like, absolutely.
Yes.
Like, it'd be hungry hippo on it. Boom. It's like they take your fingertip off. I don't know that people would do that for Jalen McMillan, right? And I like Jalen McMillan. Like, he's someone I would like to add to my roster. But I'm most certainly not going to give anyone a first for him. And I don't think a second's going to be enough. Maybe 2 seconds.
He's got to be a package. He's got to be a leverage deal where I can give you Jalen McMillan. Here, I'll give you an example. I'll give you Jalen McMillan. You give me Jacoby Myers in a 26 second. You doing that?
Sorry. I was reading Cody's stats.
I'll give you Jalen McMillan. You give me Jacoby Myers in a second.
I'm giving you Jacoby Myers in a second.
Yep, Jacoby Myers is
you're asking the wrong tiers, right?
2 tiers lower than McMillan on KTC. Now, that's the type of example. As soon as I start putting a second and these other names in there, you're going, there's no way I would do that, because your mind goes, wait, Darnell Mooney, Jacoby Myers, those guys could outproduce Jalen McMillan. You know what I mean? Like, and you're giving me so it really just comes down to, like, he's not getting traded for his pick equivalent. He's not getting traded for the 208, the 205. You know what I mean? There has to be a strategy of what you're doing with a guy like that. And that's the main reason I wouldn't buy into Marvin Mims and definitely wouldn't buy into Jalen McMillan, because there's a better leverage trade that I can get. You know how you get burned on the Myers in a second for McMillan trade chain? Is if Jalen McMillan becomes Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Right.
Then you're like, holy shit, that was a terrible deal. You know what I mean? But that if he just becomes
it's one of those, it's a terrible deal in hindsight, right? But it's not like you could not beat yourself up about that. You know what I mean? Like you could, because it's a right process move. Like you continually do that over and over again, you're going to win. Once in a blue, it might be 1 time out of 10, you're going to be wrong. But, and it'll feel like, well, I've really lost out on that 10% of the time that I was wrong, except that you were correct 90% of the time. And you were able to do many things with those picks and those other players. At least hopefully you were.
Interesting.
That's Kyle Borg.
I get put it this way, and I love
small sample size.
I love you, Cody, but there's a reason that this is definitely a little bit of a biased stat poll, because all the names on there were not names people would have wanted for various reasons. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I get it, but
it's a small sample size. I'll say that, right? It is a very small sample size. When we're looking at 5 people, it's almost like I don't even know if it's worth even. I don't want to say discussing. It's an interesting tidbit, but when there's only been, I guess, it'll be the 6th, only 6 players that have ever done it. I don't know. It's hard to put a lot of stock into that as a sample size.
And I got to give a shout out to Be More Like Lamar. I mean, I get it. I liked McMillan too, but Shane, what was his trinity before Chris Godwin got injured? Just humor me. Take a guess.
3.6.
Lower. Would that be good or bad?
Really?
If it's in the 2s, is that usually good?
No, I was going as low as I could possibly think of anyone that would get snaps again after that.
Yes. To think that he would have just had what he did all year when Godwin and Evans were there, I don't think that's true. And he took advantage of the opportunity, but it's just, where does he go from here when he's already wide receiver 32? And shit, I can see a couple of the guys that, like, I can definitely see the steam for Marvin Mims or for Jalen McMillan exceeding Keon Coleman, Jaden Reed, Brandon Ayuk. Those are the guys just ahead of him on KTC. Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore. Like, he could crack the mid-20s. Godwin leaves, he could crack the top 20.
Oh, my.
Which that just becomes you're making a really expensive bet there.
I'm Walmart. It's a blue light special if he gets to the 20s, bro. Like, you want to give me DJ Moore and anything. Look, I was willing to take Jacoby Myers in a second for him. I'll clearly take DJ Moore for him. You want to give me who else was above him? There was a couple other players that you listed right there that I would take.
Well, let's hit a few more because I want to get to these questions before we end the show.
Here we do have. I just want to get one. We got one super chat. We got to make sure we get this dude in Jafari. Jeff. I think that's how you spell it.
J Ferrari.
J Ferrari. Okay, don't mind me.
Yeah. It's definitely not Ferrari. That's not Fari. It's Ferrari.
Jafari. Anyway. Okay, that's close enough. Superflex, tight end premium league. I don't know how many starters there are. Okay.
This is easy. This is easy for me. Even not knowing the starters, give me Neighbors and the highest pick.
So Neighbors and the 102. Oh, for just the 103, 4, 2, and 3? Oh, yeah. Yep. Dude, that's Neighbors by about a kabillion.
And I'm guessing, without knowing your roster, thank you for the super chat, Jay Ferrari. There's probably a quarterback consideration in here of some sort, right? Like, there's a reason you're probably willing to make this deal if you have the 102 and Neighbors. It's because you need a quarterback. And we're about to talk about a couple quarterbacks. If you're thinking you need a quarterback and you have to get one with one of these rookie picks, there's better ways, in my opinion, versus banking on these guys, you know?
Yeah, and we've talked about it. It's super flex. I know that it's super flex. So your first instinct is, I got to smash a quarterback in there. You don't. Right. You know, You absolutely don't. You know who's my super flex in this league? Malik Neighbors. There's my super flex. He's outscoring.
I think with the quarterback market, there's just better ways to approach it than trade not just Neighbors, but you're trading the higher pick, right? You actually could be trading as much as we think we know the tiers today. Oh, okay. Then the other way around. You take
hit accept immediately. Like, hang up on us. Go hit accept and then send us a screenshot of that. And
yeah,
then,
when we're crushing you in the chat for the trade, and you're like, I'm on the other side. Yeah, just everything we said, just reverse engineer it. That's what we meant to say. Real quick, Brian Thomas Jr. is another one of the risers. I didn't talk about him because I know Shane would buy the shit out of him, right? But how high would you pay? Would you give up the 101?
Yes.
101 and 108. Start 11 Superflex. So it's one of those other picks where you're not really, you could turn that into a vet or you could draft a Hopium player, but you got to give up the leverage.
I can't do 101 and 108.
Okay.
I can do 101 and 112. I can do
101 and a future 26 first. So you can bet against yourself and say that first is going to be late, but you also give up the 126 first that you're holding that you could spend later.
Yeah,
that's a lot of conviction, Shane.
Not to hedge too much, right? It's start 11. Like you really, like your roster has to be like built to just go ahead and sustain the fact that it has.
Well, how many times have you moved a future first like that and then kicked yourself in a month when you don't have one? But you are getting Brian Thomas.
I'll tell you what,
he's a super stud.
No problem with giving up the 101 for him. Like, and I've got the 101 in a couple leagues. If somebody wants to give me a BTJ for 101, I'll do that straight up. The 108 and a start 11, it's a little much. You know what I mean? It's a little much. It's a little more than I can give. If I can make that a 27 first. Oh, wait, that's the Jeremiah Smith year, right? Never mind. Can't give that up. That's gold. Maybe I will give up the 26 first, Brian Thomas, and try to get a little bit back on the end. As usual, going back to the beginning part of this conversation, just give me a little something.
Can you get a running back? Can you get a 27 second? Just make it feel like you got a second piece to play with. Yeah,
exactly.
The other two, real quick, quarterback. This kind of leads to Jay Ferrari's question about the quarterbacks. Like, you're going to have to pay the 103, 104 for one of those QBs. I'm assuming that's probably why this team, the team trading him Neighbors in 102 might think, I want two quarterbacks. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so they need both of those picks, not just the 102. But Bryce Young and Michael Penix are two of the top four risers. Both came on at the end of the year. Penix is one of the biggest risers just because he's one of the few QBs that, came from the kind of buried range to now he's quarterback 16 and Bryce Young is quarterback 19. So are they just a product of, and this is just my quick answer on this, they're fine.
Yes.
I don't think either are difference makers, but I think they also are only rising because a lot of the players around them have kind of settled into this muddy tier of QBs where it's like Caleb Williams fell, Jordan Love fell, CJ Stroud fell, Kyler Murray fell, Brock Purdy fell. Jared Goff had a great year, but he can only go so high, right? Trevor Lawrence fell. Tua Tagovailoa fell. Anthony Richardson fell. Dak Prescott fell. Like all these guys kind of, I don't want to say collapsed this year, but like I'm reading you off some of those names. Who would you rather have, Dak Prescott or Bryce Young if you're getting an extra pick on the Dak side? You know what I mean?
By 1,000% Dak.
Like right there, just that name alone, and even Tua or Trevor Lawrence, like you're kind of like, I either don't care or I'll take whatever side gives me the leverage. So I'm definitely not buying these guys, but I have a counterpoint after you talk.
I mean, I was going to go, I'll just take Dak straight up over both of them. Like that to me, like is you're putting way too much stock into what happened last year with Dak in what he played, 5 games, whatever he played. It wasn't great. I get it. That's even if Prime goes there. And I don't think Prime will be trading Dak for his son.
Here's the funny thing. So Ray even said this the other day. He would rather have Michael Penix over Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, right?
Yeah.
But then if I asked him, would you give up the 103 for Dak Prescott? People would be like, nah, not really.
Right.
Would you give up Dak or who would you rather have, Michael Penix or Dak Prescott?
Me? Dak.
Yeah. Okay. So the point is like,
they're roughly the same age. So
it's just interesting that I ask you Penix versus Ward and Shedeur, and people would take Penix, right?
Right.
Then I ask you Dak or the 103, and people would go, what would you prefer, Dak or 103?
103.
Okay. Dak or Penix, you would take Dak.
Mm-hmm.
But then
no,
it's
I would take Cam Ward. I would take Cam Ward over both of them.
Okay, but you get what I'm saying here, right?
Yeah.
Like all of these answers lean towards there's no way I'm paying that high of a price for any of the QBs in this range. But guess what somebody's going to do? Take a quarterback at 102 and 103. So it's like it are right now just the value of the 102, 103 that you have a plan to take a quarterback with. Is it just the pure, I don't even want to say like hopium upside, because I don't even hear anybody saying, oh, Cam Ward has the upside of Jaden Daniels. You know what I mean? But like, what is it that we're easily accepting? Everybody in here would do a mock draft and go, they would take the QB1 off the board at like the 103, 104, right? But they would never touch Bryce Young for that price. But yet, if you asked them, who would you prefer, Shedeur Sanders and Bryce Young, half the people would say Bryce Young. You see what I'm saying? The logic.
I want to poll that, right? So I'm gonna, people say this about me all the time. I'm an eternal optimist, right? So as soon as I get the new and fresh, I generally always like the new and fresh over the old and busted. Now I'm calling Bryce Young old and busted when he's been in the league 2 years. But I maybe I'm just more of an optimist. But I don't know. We've done 15 mocks or so. I've seen Shedeur and Cam fall. I've seen them fall pretty far into the draft. Yeah.
I agree with Josh, but overwhelmingly people are going to say, if I need a quarterback, they're going to justify doing it. Maybe not both, but there's going to be one. You know what I mean? There's going to be a quarterback, and then that quarterback is immediately compared. And I'll just give a name that you don't like. I know you don't like Trevor Lawrence. But like Trevor Lawrence is going to be back-to-back with one of the quarterbacks that's drafted in the top 5, and you would never dream to give up a top 5 pick for Trevor Lawrence.
That's probably that, I'll tell you right now. If you're thinking about taking one of those players, Shedeur or Cam at 103, 104, even 105, literally pull up the KTC rankings and go, would I give that up for Dak Prescott? Or what, you know what I mean? Would I give that up for Trevor Lawrence? And, if you rank those players for whatever reason well above Dak Prescott, Trevor Lawrence, Michael Penix, sure, go for it. But if you even have to think about it heavily, just take the running back. And I get it. I'm the guy, Scott, we were here a couple of years ago telling you not to take Bijan when your roster is not ready for it. But there's some thoughts around that are evolving too. But like BPA, man. Like I want to be like an NFL team. Like if the quarterback's the last part I need to fill in, I can be okay with that. I don't want to reach for a Matt Corral again ever in my life.
You know who the next rising quarterback is besides Bryce Young and Michael Penix? Just to humor you, Shane. Take a guess. Biggest riser over the last 7 days.
7 days.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. I'm just
technically 30 days, but I guarantee this spike has come in the last week.
Who? Well, it can't be Jaden. He's already where he was.
No,
it was already high.
It's exactly why you don't take the rising list that seriously. It's Justin Fields, because apparently he's going to be a different player when he is eligible to sign somewhere as a starter.
What's funny about that, right, is you could have gotten Justin Fields at any point after Russ Wilson got the gig, probably for a third or a Jerome Ford. And now he's popular because the season's over and he's going to be a starter somewhere. Like, why didn't you just buy him 3 months ago? 2 months ago?
He's about to pass, probably in the morning. He will have passed Geno Smith in dynasty value, which that's really just a bet on, that just shows you the power of just the pure hopium of Justin Fields could latch somewhere. And I can't argue with it. If you have some Justin Fields and he signs somewhere to be their bridge starter, I'm not betting on him, but you know what? The market will like him again. Just because of where he started. So
if I could have Justin Fields do I have him in a best ball? If I could get him in a bunch of leagues like startups late in the draft, I'll do that. I'm probably not going to be trying to trade for him because
you say that until he goes in round 12 and you're like, I don't want to pay an actual player to get him. I want him for nothing, but he's not going for nothing. So
now then I will be out on the Justin Fields train.
Let's rip some of these questions and then we'll get out of here. We'll spend an extra 5-10 minutes just because people did show up for us and did put these questions in here. So first one, Trending Fantasy will come out tomorrow. So that'll be John and Mitch talking rookie running backs. So looking forward to that. All right. Let's see. We're just going to rip through these just like DTI 5. 2 inbox offers, J-Rod.
Okay.
1 QB, start 9. He gives Brian Thomas Jr., DeAndre Swift, and the 104. He gets Justin Jefferson. 1 QB, start 9. You doing that?
Well, I'm looking at the second deal, right? I could give the 101 and the Rome and 201 and get Hall, the 102 and the 26 first. I'm more comfortable with that.
Interesting. So basically, you'd be willing to give up Genty for Brees Hall, and then you get the 102
and the 26
and
first.
The 26 first for Roma Dunze. Yeah, I agree. And the 201, I don't care much about it. A 1 QB, start 9.
No.
So you'd rather do the second deal than his first deal. You'd rather do that over the Jefferson deal?
Yeah. I think I would. I would.
You like yourself some BTJ, huh?
I'm not happy that I don't have him in more leagues, especially when I loved him coming out last year, but that's neither here nor there.
Okay. Jay Ferrari put a question in there earlier. Would you trade 2 early firsts and 2 seconds for Neighbors and the 2025 second pick?
Let's just call it a 12 by 10.
No, that's the same question he put in earlier, just in a different form. He actually put the picks in there instead. So we'll move on to the next one. See what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
All right, Sean. 12 by 10 super flex 1.5 tight end premium lineup league. Kyler, Josh Allen, Sam Darnold. Okay. Brees, Achane, Connor, Lamb, Nico, Marvin Harrison, Drake London. Man, look at that receiver core. Lamb, Nico, Marv, London, JSN, Addison, Reed, Bowers, Pitts. 106, 3 seconds, 4 thirds. What moves are you trying to make? Quickly. 12 by 10.
I'm trying to shed some wide receiver. Can I get future picks for those? I don't even want players back. Can I get future firsts for some of those wide receivers?
So like starting at probably one of Marv, London, JSN, and then Addison Reed can go, Kyle Pitts can go. Like that's not driving whether your team wins, right? Like
I didn't even think Pitts was worth mentioning. To be quite honest with you, I don't think.
But you say that, but he's still valued at a late first. So like doesn't mean you can get it. But the point is, you can get something. You can. You're saying liquidate the excess because whether you have Jaden Reed, Jordan Addison, Kyle Pitts, that's not impacting whether you win, right?
Right. You are stacked right here with Allen, Kyler, Hall, Chain, Connor, and then the other first 4 wide receivers.
Similar to before. No format here, but I assume you are taking the package side here. Is it more fun?
It is more fun, isn't it?
I mean, you've turned down a Chase and a Jefferson deal where you're giving up significant capital on top of BTJ, but
God, Chase is fun too, man. Chase really, really rounded into absolute Murderville this year. Like he finally formed into the full, like, oh, this is what we thought he could be. He is that now. He is him.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You're still taking the package.
I think I would take the package, right? And then what I would do is I would offer right back to him. I'll be like, I'll give you the 106, a 27 first, and a 24 first. Can I get Chase off of you?
A 24 first.
That's next year.
You're probably
one that didn't hit.
You know what you could do? You could probably go and find, that's the benefit of having a lot of leagues. You could go sell Chase here and then go offer a different type of deal where you didn't have to give up your BTJ.
I make this deal and then I go 106, a 27 first, and a 25 or 26.
But don't you got to wait a little bit to let that manager forget? Like, because if you were doing this move with Shane, in 2 weeks he would have forgot that he already traded you Jamar Chase.
Yeah, I would have been like, ooh, that's interesting. I gotta look at that. No. But so I wouldn't immediately go to the Chase owner. I'd go to the Jefferson owner and say,
there you go.
Here's 3 first. Can I get them?
All right. Couple more. Derek, 12 by 9, 104, and Tyrone Tracy for Kyler Murray in a super flex.
12 by 9, Kyler.
Kyler?
Maybe. Yes.
I mean, this is right back to the conversation we just had, right? Like the person that's trading Kyler for the 104, if they draft a quarterback, then they're just hoping, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, let's just do the math, right? Genty, Caleb, Hampton, Tet. Well, Tet and Tracy. Just humor.
If I told you also have Josh Allen and Jaden Daniels, you're selling Kyler for this, right?
Then we are.
So,
yes.
so this deal only gets done when the demand on one side or the other matches the willingness to do the trade. Like if I go, oh, I'm stacked at quarterback, of course you're going to take the package, right? But if the plan is I want a quarterback and I'm currently sitting on Kyler, I don't do this deal just to draft a quarterback.
No,
that's why it's interesting to talk about, the context behind the rosters. So, all right, a few more. Let's skip that one. There you go. Start 7. 1 QB, 111 or Michael Pittman.
I'm just going to go ahead and take the 111. There's only it's start 7. I'm sorry, it's start 7.
I'm taking the 111 because it has a 2% chance of mattering.
Right.
It's the other side probably doesn't. Yes,
it's a dart throw where I know Michael Pittman is likely a wide receiver 2, which isn't bad. But I start 7. I need difference makers.
And this is a common strategy that people miss in shallow leagues. When you have guys like Michael Pittman, I don't care if you get the 204, right? Like, give me something that has a chance to move somewhere except for stand in the spot that I've been in. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So does a second or a third matter in a start 7? No, but neither does probably 90% of your players. So I'd rather just have picks over players.
Yep.
Let's see. Fly meet one. What players on the fringe of elite, London, Wilson, are you actively selling during the offseason if you are getting leverage deals? That's easy for me. Anybody I'll sell for leverage deals. But I think what he's trying to get at is is there any players where you're scared you might get burned, which probably forms this question. So we're talking would you do a leverage deal with Caleb Williams where you down tier to Trevor Lawrence for the 202, something like that?
202 ain't enough, but yeah, I get the vibe you're throwing out there.
Anybody come to mind that you're willing to bet on them not being? Because I think Garrett Wilson and Drake London are what they are. You know what I mean? They're very good, but do they ever ascend to be elite? Probably not. They would need to run into the right situation in the right season, and it'll all come together for them to be wide receiver 3, 4.
I've been trying to find ways, and this is the opposite of that, but I've been trying to find ways to get Kyler and Caleb on my roster, and I'm still working through that. So if I can find a deal the other way, that'll help me find a deal my way. So
would you pay Jared Goff and the 107 for Caleb Williams?
It feels like I'm not getting a discount.
You're not.
Yeah.
You're paying for the fact that he's Caleb Williams. I don't care about the production. You're getting Caleb freaking Williams, Shane. He could be a superstar.
You know what? And that's actually not a bad way to get him. You know what? It's actually not. It's not. I know that.
And you could get him because I guarantee you there's a player in your league that's I'm getting the better quarterback for the next 2-3 years, right, and I'm getting a pick.
You will get cross-eyed looks from a few of the people in your league.
All right, so we already hit that one. 3 more, and then we'll be done. Nate, 12 by 11, 6-point per passing touchdown. Michael Penix and Brian Thomas for Patrick Mahomes and Isaiah Pacheco. I know where you're at on this one. I'm guessing you're taking the BTJ side. You'll eat the quarterback value.
It is a little harder, right? Because Mahomes really showed out the second half of the year. Right?
Ever since that Shane says that just shit on him, he blew up since then.
He took it to heart. He said, all right, I'm going to show you. Your take is right down the crapper, buddy. Penix and BTJ. Man, BTJ is so far over Pacheco that difference is better. Does
Pacheco even matter in this deal? He matters
because it started.
He is the throw-in that you would be like, well, if that's the best I can get, I'll take,
Yeah. Look, I'm going BTJ, right? BTJ's got the chance to be that elite wide receiver grouping is getting a little higher, but he's still in that grouping.
You know why I think the answer to why to go BTJ here is because we already talked about Penix, right? You can move around the quarterback landscape with Penix and feel a little better, even if you don't like Penix. You know what I mean? You could go, I can get T-Law or Dak or whoever. But there's a ton of options that you could get to that might make you feel a little better if you don't really love Penix.
I trade Penix in a third and get Dak in a second. I got a starting quarterback and a second's probably someone that's good enough to either buy another starter or draft another starter.
K Money, thank you for the question or the comment. You got to leave the format in there. Otherwise, Shane is just completely guessing. But I assume this is a super flex with, let's just go 11 starters, 10 starters. 11 makes it easy, but 10 starters. Drake May versus Bijan. I mean, you could argue that's definitely not the 103 kicking it in, regardless of the number of starters, right? This is pretty easy for you, don't you think?
Yeah, I'm a Drake May slut too. So Drake May in the 103.
What would be the pick line for you on this? Past the range where you could get a future first for the pick? Like, would you do the 109 in Drake May? If I told you you'd be able to get a 26 first or 27 first for that pick and just don't even have to make it?
Yeah, look, it's going to depend a little bit on my roster, but I would say the 109 in the Drake May and the Drake May is probably, yeah, that would be the line of demarcation. Once we get past that, then it's like, I'll just total on the Bijan. I'm good.
Gotcha. All right, last one. The Freak said he sold Barkley and Ayuk for AJ Brown and Kyron Williams. I mean, come on.
Yeah. AJ Brown by about $1 billion over Brandon Ayuk. It's funny that you bring up AJ Brown. I got my Inner Excellence today from Amazon. I'll be reading that, and then before you know it, I'll be running routes for the Eagles, right? Because that's all it takes. Just read the book on the sideline like AJ. I'm just like him. But yeah,
we'll see how the Eagles do.
I do want to say Ray and Jay Rich. I was watching them on Bleacher Report a little bit ago, a couple hours. They both picked the Rams. I want to definitively state that is incorrect, foolhardy, and chicanery and nonsense. Yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see. All right, everybody, thank you for being in here. We had a pretty big crowd in here. A lot of comments that we couldn't get to. We'll try to hit the comments. So leave them after the video post. We'll try to get in there and respond to some of them over the next couple days. Thank you, everybody. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. And Manic and Chill is out for the evening. Have a good night, everybody.